Let me start by saying that I'm deeply humbled by this opportunity to meet you all. I wish we could have all met together in open and face to face. And you've given me the time, and I think time is the most precious thing that we can give to each other. We can give anything else, and I feel supported because you're all there. Number three, I'm not an expert climatologist or an environmentalist or so. Most of the things I'm talking to is about being a kind of change maker, looking at poverty and working about issues of poverty. And therefore, I've come into the impact of climate change. And four thing is that about my walk is the consequences of that work. And therefore, I will try to narrate why I'm walking and what's happened in the walking and where I am now and why 2021. Those are some of the things I'm going to be touching upon. I hope it's okay for you. Thank you. First of all, my full name is Pushpanath Krishnamurthy, and I think you're going to have a hard time remembering that. And it's okay with me that if you call me Push, and that's what I'm known around the world. I come from a city, Bangalore, from south of India. I'm a British citizen now for the last 20 years, but I've hardly lived here in Britain. Um, the third thing to say is most of my adult life I worked with Oxfam in India, Southern Africa for about 9.5 years, Eastern Europe, East Asia. So that's where my experiences come from. And about 8 or 9 years, I worked as a full-time popular campaigner for Oxfam in trade, and then moved on to climate change. Popular campaigning as a word was not existing before Oxfam made me a global popular campaigner. I had to define what it is and write the scope of that particular role. Um, so that's the kind of background. The second thing I want to say as an overarching thing is that Oxfam was never part of the COP discussion from the beginning. It only came into it in 2009 because we are looking and working on issues of poverty. One example I often say is that if there's a woman who has got a very small patch of land and if she wants to accumulate some kind of capital as an insurance, and let's say she wants to have a cow, it takes minimum 8 years for her to do that. And therefore, poverty is generational. It takes a long time for people to get out of the poverty, but it's not impossible. And all of us know that experience from everywhere. So Oxfam started to look at this particular issue from somewhere in 1990s and slowly starting to see there is a pattern about climate differentially impacting and our investment is going nowhere. And it's one of the reasons Oxfam wrote a paper called Weather Alert to inform ourselves and to share it with other people. Then we found that the impact of climatic on people living in poverty is so fundamentally profound that each time they have a drought or a flood or whatever, they're set back by 10 to 15 years. So that's the reason that we wanted to be part of the larger discourse that is taking place. And so Oxfam got involved in 2015, the first time, and started to write papers about things. And I was charged with the responsibility of going and finding out what's happening across the world. And as a popular campaigner, I have to find a particular approach to get to hear to the people. I decided I will actually do the hearing more from women across board. And I came with the idea of a hearing as a process, as a model. And it's not the same in everywhere because, as you know, how power operates, you can't get people freely to talk to you. So I found various ways as a popular campaigner to listen to women, the stories that I had come across and the people whom I met and the kind of impact that was happening on, really battered and beaten and really kind of lives and livelihood lost and so on. It was pretty horrible. And therefore, I was just wanting to use now to share with you one story.
এবার বান ভেঙে চতুর্দিকে নোনা পানি আসতেছে, সে কি অবস্থা। এবার দেখতে দেখতে ঘরের মধ্যে পানি উঠে গেল, মানে ওগুলা আমাদের এই ক্ষতিগ্রস্ত হচ্ছে। মানে আগে যেরকম শীত ছিল এখন শীত নেই, আগে গরম ছিল, আগে মানে বর্ষা ছিল এখন বর্ষা নেই, এখন শুধু গরম আর গরম। গরমে গায়ে ফুসফুসি বাড়ছে, ঘা পাছড়া হচ্ছে, তার কারণ মানে ডায়রিয়া হচ্ছে, আমার সব হচ্ছে। বাচ্চাগুলো নিয়ে আমি শান্তির ঠুকি থাকতে চাই, তাদের বাপ নেই, আমি না থেকে তারা মানুষ করতে পারতেন না। তা আপনারা আমাদের মুক্তি করুন, আপনারা আমাদের বিচার করুন। আমি বিচার চাই, নোনা পানির হাত থেকে আমরা বাঁচতে চাই। কলকারখানার কালো ধোয়া, এই ধোয়া আমরা টিকতে পারতিস না, আমাদের খুব কষ্ট হচ্ছে। এটা বলা হচ্ছে।
I'm sorry, every time I see that, it really hits my heart. And I was fortunate to meet Shorabanu. She was really struggling quite a lot, and I wanted to hear her story much more in detail. And she's starting to explain that, she got married to this guy, and then she moved from one village to another village. And after a child or two, one day the husband went to the mangrove forest along the sea, and that's where they collect their honey or forest products or so on. And her husband was killed by a tiger. They blamed her. And very soon in 2009, Cyclone Aila hit her. That's all the things that she's talking about. Those disease and everything was there, but it's intensified and expanded in such rapidity, and you're becoming more and more vulnerable. They found her, the partner that with whom we are working in Oxfam, on a pile of rubble and half naked. And I was listening to her story, and then I said that, I think this is a very powerful story, because the two things that she said in the story, if you really see that, she said, I want justice. And I think this is man-made. She's worked out. So those two things really caught my mind. And I said, I can actually help you to tell you a story if you want. Would you like to come to London? He said, what? She has never been out of her village. And Sharabanu did come here to London. And then she spoke to about 80 or 90 Commonwealth parliamentarians, of which 6 of them were ministers, one from South Africa. He liked the climate hearing we were doing here with all of them. They were witnesses. These were witnesses. And I was also speaking, but they did most of the talking. And the minister really got touched in his heart, and he went and did a climate hearing in the parliament in South Africa. Similarly, I had a story in Uganda where a group of grannies in a place called Jinja, I went to meet them and wanted to talk to them, and they said, just we are very hungry, go and get us some bread and Coke. They meant Coca-Cola. And I don't drink Coca-Cola on principle, but we did bring it. I found out that these grandmothers who should have let their hair down and feel happy were actually looking after, I don't know, 15, 20 or more children, grandchildren. It didn't belong to them. The second generation has nearly wiped out either AIDS, war, and various other reasons, economic and other political reason. But these women came together and wanted to take care of the next generation. From both these stories that I captured, that irrespective of what happened, these two group of women and individuals, they wanted to reimagine their life with hope. In spite of everything, there was hope. Shorban wanted to, she says, come on, give me a chance. I want to rewrite my life. And so did the grannies of Jinja. It was in Uganda, I felt like I got to do something about it. I was Oxfam's campaigner and so on. I'm doing all these things that I have personally, I have to do something, because I believed in some of what Gandhi has done. And when you see extreme injustice, you have to take some kind of a stand. And of course, the often used phrase, be the change you want to be. And I decided that I have to do something. And that is what led me to my PowerPoint. Yeah, first one. Oh, can I go? Yeah. Can I go here? Yeah. Can we do that? You said, yeah, there. Okay, okay. Yeah. So I decided to walk from Copenhagen, sorry, Oxford to Copenhagen. 595 is 275 miles. That is the first Dundee March of Mahatma Gandhi. And it is a time where I was completely unknown, and I had to find ways in which I get to be known. And I'm both a street theater artist as well as a spiritual singer. So I started to sing on the way in Tamil, which means which means that even if the big blue sky hit on your forehead, be fearless and fearless and fearless. But I was terrified. But I did walk, and I was able to meet parliamentarians, policymakers, priests, parents, pupil, postwomen, and just about everybody. And I was kind of put on the stage, so to speak. And at a point where I got down to Denmark, and I was met by 15 television cameras and started to feel a bit like a rock star for a while. And but what it really made me to do is to think about that this journey, where what I'm doing, hardly anybody knew that the climate is actually already impacting and people are paying a heavy price for it. So my job was to tell the story, and I started to do that. But it also made me to reflect deeply that I got to go back and work from a place where the impact is even much bigger and broader and so on. I decided to go back to India. And that's my next slide. If you, most of you, some of you may be even more familiar about the south of India has a series of mountains called the Western Ghat. Ghat means series of mountains. These are the mountains, they are regulators of the monsoon, but these mountains are also the places where coffee and tea is grown, among other crops. And most people don't realize that the river that has a catchment on the Western Ghat, which flows from the west to the east. Indeed, all rivers flow from the west, from the east to the Bay of Bengal in India, is the river Kaveri. It's one of the most sacred river, probably kind of reaching out and sustaining life and livelihood to 350 million people in the south, including this body. And there was problem with the amount of water that was coming, more because of how it is being used, and also because of erratic rains and everything else. There have been water battles going on at village level to the two states and language and everything else. So the coffee growers, 90% of whom are small growers, they wanted me to highlight the issues because they were being beaten by market, beaten by monsoon, beaten by climate change and everything else. They're piling up huge amount of debt, and some of them even committing suicide. So they chose an occasion to get me married to coffee. That is the one. You can see the marriage. They bring this very sacred water in their head, and I go through really about 2 hours of various things that now I've become the son-in-law of the coffee, so to speak. So I never stop speaking about what's happening in a coffee area. The outcome of this, like everything else I've done, is always align with local groups and local organizations, not necessarily NGOs, and to start really contributing and complementing to them. So the largest farmers organization is there, the Karnataka Growers Federation. And then in the process of this walk, we brought together all stakeholders. And one of the first step was to actually start demonstrating that it is possible to say that if you grow Arabica coffee, that is the most eco-friendly coffee. Indeed, India is the only country that grows coffee under a canopy. A lot of people don't even know India is the fifth largest producer of coffee. And because of that, that forest in which Arabica is growing is the best forest you can find. It is eco-friendly, it is a carbon sink, and it stores water and everything else. But that forest is being removed. These farmers who were the trustees of the forest have become the poachers of the forest because their conditions are pretty desperate. So we brought all of them together and we produced a report, Coffee to Go. It's an exceptional report, and I can send you the, and this was released by farmers in the COP biodiversity meeting in 2012 in India by farmers. This is a report which is translated in local language, unlike a lot of academic works which remains in English. It's now about 2,000 copies are there among farmers. They know what it is all about. And two lines, if I can read from that, if you allow me, please. The coffee beans of the district of 3 districts share their air and nutrients with other plants, vegetation, and wildlife in a concert that contributes to the biodiversity conservation, protects watershed, generates rural livelihood, and soaks up greenhouse gas emission. And that is being costed here. And that is what we have done. The title is The Vital Role of Indian Coffee Farmers, Ecosystem Services, and Livelihood. So that was the first step, and I continue to work with them. Now we have got 5 parliamentarians from different political parties. They are all swear by this report, even though they are politically different. And the work is going on. They are to make them into fair trade is quite a long process. There are at least about 100 groups of small farmers now moving slowly into more organic, less pesticide, more working together to sell not as a cooperative, but as a business cooperative, and slowly starting to change the landscape in terms of this. But the climate change is really, really impacting in a very severe way in that area. And therefore, I started to think I should do something different. Another thing to say is that I started walking from the top of the mountain, which is about 7,500 feet, and walk along the sacred river Kaveri. And indeed, the mountain of the southwestern Ghat is older than the Himalayas. That's something for you to know. And went to the plains of Mysore. That's one. Next one. I came here to Britain and met some of the fair trade people to talk about what's the story of coffee. Indeed, some of them didn't know we were growing coffee. Garstang is the first fair trade town. I walked up to Keswick. It was a 100-mile walk. I probably think it was one of the worst walk. I fell down many times just to tell the story. But I moved back because I used to work with the union workers and so on with the tea growers, and they asked, how come you're not walking the other side? So I did another walk along the Bay of Bengal, along the sea, across the plain, and climbed up the same mountain from the other side. I put here 450, but it was nearly 500 plus. And in the process, we have now got 2 fair trade towns for the first time in South Asia. That is an important one for you to recognize. Next. Just these are some of the things that we did, we did right on top of the Ooty is the top. Puducherry is where the Bay of Bengal is. And you can see the slide on the right side is about cotton was another story, which was a very powerful one. It's even darker than the coffee story because a lot of farmers who were actually growing under the rain-fed crop of cotton were introduced to what is called Egyptian long staple cotton, made a lot of money initially, but it's really poisoned the soil, it's poisoned the air, and people again accumulated a lot of debt and high number of suicide there. So we started to bring in wanting to make fair trade into main trade, not just as a fair trade, wanting to write a new narrative in India about how we can actually make enlightened selfishness integral to any business that we can do, because we got to sustain it. So about 30 to 40,000 farmers are the only one. It's like a silver line going on from the seed to the t-shirt. This work is going on. Just another example of a sweet. I mean, we got 5,000 cocoa farmers, organic cocoa, from the seed to the final chocolate. Every little part of that of the supply chain, we're going to make sure that it is a fair one, it is a sustainable one, and therefore it can remain for a long time. The benefits spread across every little stakeholder. And that was that. The work is still going on, and we are working with schools and colleges and so on. And we are integrating more and more of the fair trade work among businesses in India. And the team, the Fair Trade International team in Bangalore, and number of their contacts of fair trade farmers and fair trade businesses and all are coming together. We're hoping to promote more of the fair trade town. I participate now and then when they need me, but otherwise it's pretty independent and it's operating on its own. And they just spoke to me the other day. I asked them the few things that I can say, and I told these are all the things I'm going to be saying, and they said this is fine. And now it's 2021. I was supposed to be walking last year, and I was working with a group of youth leaders in Africa. And when I shared some of this, they felt that this should be an event that they wanted to use and work on it. But 2020, as you know, COVID came in. And I think most of you know the 2021 is a COP26. And the important thing for me, why I'm doing this particular walk, is that Britain is my home too, and I hardly know it. And the greatest thing is between 2009 and now 11 years, I've seen massive amount of change in Britain. At that time, nobody walked. I'm the only one. Now we've got at least 4 or 5 groups are walking. Many people are going in bicycle. And this travel, I'm cutting through Britain, home by home, I'm learning about community, about groups, and about faith groups, and everybody really understanding what is this all about. And I can say reasonably confidently, so far I have taken 32 million steps. This is going to be a million. Now I'm nearing about 500,000 already. And my learning is individuals, children, communities, councils, businesses are starting to change, which was not there before. We are at an interesting point of our life that these changes has to be increased, and it is possible only we are all together on this one. As you see, one of my key messages is that the poorest half of the world's population, 3.1 billion people, only contributing 7%. And the climate hearing that I was doing along with Sharabanu and others showed that women are hit first, worst, and hardest. They're paying with their life and livelihood for something that they didn't contribute at all. And they need support for adapting. 100 billion has been promised, and we haven't seen the color of the money. And my message has been individuals, communities, councils are also changing. They want change. They want to stop the warming. But I'm also saying that my story is about the people who are paying an immense amount of price. It's not 2050. When I asked, and you can see the route here, I started on 2nd October. I'm now here, and I even keep forgetting where I am. Settle. Because day after day, I'm meeting people, and day after day, I'm learning much. And day after day, I'm being hosted freely. The principle of Gandhi, I said, if this cause is right, I shouldn't be spending money. And indeed, I haven't spent any. People are feeding me, people are putting me up, people are sharing their stories, and I'm collecting and trying to distill that. I'll be going to Lake District, and about 1,000 students' cards have been written as messages. I don't know how I'm going to carry it, but all these things, I'm going to bring it to Glasgow on the 3rd of November. I think that's the last one. There are a number of options for people to respond to. And since I work for Oxfam, I'm actually going to shop after shops. There are 13 shops, but I've already done 18 shops because that belong to the community. And indeed, for me, the Oxfam story is about the earliest recycling, either books or clothes, and people volunteering to do something and bring about change in their community. So I'm doing that. And Oxfam is talking about you can actually do a virtual walk. 1.5 is 1.5 degrees they're talking about. It's a straightforward one. If you're an adult, you can just go and look at March in 2021. and it's a World Climate March, and those steps will be added to my step. I have done 32 million. I'm going to do another million, 32, and other people can actually join. That's one of the action. But I know there are variety.
Recording in progress.
There are variety of action that people can do. Yeah. And last bit I wanted to say that one thing I'm very clear. Emission-led growth has created immense and obscene wealth. It's also lifted people out of poverty, but it's clearly evidence are very, very clear, but it has plundered this planet to a point of catastrophe. It's no more climate impact, it's climate emergency. The second most important point I wanted to share with you, I support a Gandhian movement, which is actually talking about a non-violent economy. And I can tell you this much, that climate impact has actually exasperated simple conflicts into major violent conflicts across the world, whether it is pasture land, whether it is water, or whether it is land itself in terms of its appropriation by groups from very small farmer and indigenous people. So the violence is pretty wide. And I've witnessed people actually fighting for a bucket of water, sometimes even getting killed. So that's the reason I'm supporting this Gandhian movement called Jai Jagat. It's almost like a perfect storm. But I asked my friend and my advisor, a great climate scientist, Chris Funk, who wrote a book called Drought, Floods and Fire. Is there a window of opportunity? He said, yeah, it is there. It's a small one. But the more we learn about what's happening climate in terms of all of us, it's now here. Earlier, we used to say a climate apartheid because the North has contributed to this and South is paying for it. Not anymore. It's right there in front of our doors. And the opportunity is there. We have $100 trillion economy. How much money do we need? He says about $1 trillion. You put it down to person head, about $125. 5 years of that actually we can address. We have the technology. We have the answers for what we can do to adopt because we are already locked in for 100 years. And we can actually stop the warming too. Those are my key message. And I hope you can take a look at my walk, gopushgo.co.uk in the Facebook. I'm an individual. I support everybody else. I truly believe in cooperation. I truly believe in interface and intersection. There are others who are walking. I support them. And I would like each of you to support me. I'm going to be 70 years in a couple of months. And I need your good wishes. I need you to tell me what you're doing. I'm going to school after school. And those kids are really, really anxious about what's happening. 2019, I think, is an unprecedented year. In my lifetime, I've never seen young people actually change a nation's view. Britain actually declared a climate emergency because of young people. So my submission to you is please support me in this journey of mine. I've come half the way and I have to go another halfway. Spread the word about what we can all do. And I think we got to spread this. And we cannot do that if we don't hope. Hope is the spark, and the spark is the hope. With those few words, I think I stop here so that we can reflect, and I'll try to answer however much I can the questions that you have. I'm grateful. Thank you.